I'm Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. I had the privilege of being at the best chapter at Pi Alpha Delta at Temple University, and actually was a part of the refounding of that chapter, which left campus for a while. Was involved as a new member educator, joined the IHQ staff for a bit after college, and then went back to Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, where I ran for state rep and won. Ran for the United States Senate as only first openly gay man in American history, actually, to run for the U.S. Senate, and the first African-American man to ever run for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania as well. For me, there were already a number of, fraternities on campus. I was so involved with a variety of student activities, I had jobs off campus. And so for me, there wasn't this great desire necessarily to join a fraternity. And then I kind of heard about this thing, Pi Lambda Phi, and read our creed. And that really not only resonated with what my work had been on campus as somebody who was very outspoken on a variety of different topics, certainly this idea of human dignity, and to learn about an organization that seemed to be in line with that. It felt like to me an add-on to all the things that I was already doing on campus. When I think about the creed and its meaning, I think first you have to ground it in the context of when it was written. We are talking about in the early 20th century, right, where this was authored and written at a time where many of those words were aspirational more than they were reality. And I think we're in a moment right now, and I'm sure we'll find ourselves in moments decades from now where those words become aspirational as much of a reflection of who we are in this place and space. And so it is very much a call to action. I think it is a speaking of what we hope to be. And then it's also a reminder, I think, in so many ways of how far we have come. But what you have is a group of men who are focused around this generative idea of freedom and justice and the elimination of prejudice. And if we can create that within our chapters, if we can create that more broadly on our college campuses, and then if that can spread out into the world, wow, what a wonderful impact that can and will have in the future. The Pi Lam experience, especially becoming a member of IHQ, I think one of the things I can first say is I got to see parts of the country I probably would not have seen otherwise. As a member of staff and expansion, team, went to places around the country, which was an incredible experience. One of my best friends in the world, I recruited to the University of Illinois chapter, Lieutenant Colonel Tristan Monroe. I was in his wedding, and I think about just the friendships that I've made from it. I also think about the tools that I gained in terms of being able to go anywhere and speak to anybody. Maybe I already had a bit of that, but I think when you have a natural inclination to something and you have a place to sort of hone whatever that talent is. And for me, it gave me the ability to walk up to anybody, look them dead in the eye, say, I'm Malcolm Kenyatta, and begin to build a relationship that is not transactional. There are always things that you do well, always areas where you look back and wish maybe you'd made a different turn on that road. It certainly is emphasized when you're in a chapter about not 4 years but a lifetime. But those are words, and often words are easy. Implementing what is behind that is harder. And as you get older and you start a family and you have careers and you do other things, there are people who were seminally important in your life and your development who you just end up losing contact with. I think what the conferences do and these other moments where you're kind of reminded, in my case, being on Temple's campus. I represent the Temple area as a state rep. Sometimes driving past the house on Broad Street, you're reminded of, wow, I should reach out to that guy and check in. In terms of the things that I've done, well, I really tried to soak up everything I could from the experience. And again, I always go back to those conversations that you have, particularly when you have to go out and recruit people for the next class. And I know that that's scary for a lot of people because somebody might reject you. Somebody might say, I don't want to do it. But I will tell you, sometimes you have some of the best conversations with people who say, no, I don't want to be a member. That reminds you why you decided to join. And some of those conversations I think I keep with me too. Part of it is just getting up and showing up even when you don't necessarily feel it, whatever that means. It is a practice of day in, day out, getting up. And along the way, you are reminded, particularly for me, somebody who has chosen, a public life of public service, getting involved in the political arena, as President Roosevelt talked about. I get encouraged, frankly, even when I'm, been on the road for days or for hours and I'm tired. When you meet people who just want to see stuff work in their life, right? You get reminded of why you're doing it. And I think that's true in whatever field you're in. There are moments where you are reminded why you got on the path in the first place. And you don't get those reminders unless you stay on the path. But those moments aren't hand delivered to you, the moments where you get re-inspired. Those moments come like an oasis in a desert, but you got to walk to find it. So mentors, I can think of two. One is a Pi Lam, a former governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell, who was the chair of my first campaign for State House. And as you might imagine, when I ran for U.S. Senate, I called him then too to ask for his help, support. And he said, Kenyatta, you're going to lose, but you should still run because there are a lot of people who get to meet you as you're going around the state. And he said, I think a lot of people be shocked by how well you do. And as somebody who's won Pennsylvania a couple of times, he ended up being right, but it still was an important thing, for me to do. Another mentor for me was a woman who was a teacher still at Temple University, Dr. Kamika Williams Witherspoon. And she was somebody who really taught me about what she calls nomo, which is a word, African word, which means words have power. And she taught a class called Poetry as Performance, and I ended up being her TA for many, many years, I guess 3 of the 4 years, right, that I was in school. And, that connects to the creed for me, right? Words have power. The recitation of them, the meaning behind them, and then how we implement those words into action. America is just that, an experiment. And I think that is critical for us to pinch ourselves and maybe lightly pinch our neighbor and remind them. And at the core of the battle that's being fought right now, I believe, is a battle that is about what our creed references over and over again. Are people going to be able to be treated fairly, equitably, and justly? And are we willing, the creed says, with our life, are we willing to do that? Put aside political affiliation. You have a lot of folks who aren't voting at all, who aren't engaged in the process. And I think that is terrifying to me, that there are folks who are giving up on the idea that democracy can work, giving up on the idea that this is an experiment that can endure. But I am hopeful because I see a bunch of people standing up, speaking up. Some folks like me decided to run for office. Some people decided to just register a couple of friends to vote. But what it's going to require from us is an understanding that politics is not just about elected leaders, that politics is about each and every one of us, and that a healthy civic diet, as I like to call it, doesn't start and end on Election Day. It's something that requires us to be engaged about what is going on, to talk to people in our communities about what we value and why, and then to vote for people who share those values. And I hope we vote for people who share the values of preserving democracy. If I have the opportunity to go back in time, and hopefully if I have the opportunity to go forward in time, if I can just screw around with this thing, I would give myself the same advice. It will be okay. I mean, I would tell you, there's nothing like your 4 years or 5 years in undergrad. I mean, you can go back to grad school, you can get a post-secondary degree, you can never replicate what that moment in time is. And my advice always to folks, particularly who are in college, slow down, just relax, take the time, certainly do your assignments, fill out the applications, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, slow down, because it really will be okay. You will be okay, and you will miss those memories, which just become these intangible specters in your mind. You'll miss that because you can never capture it again. And so if I could go back, I would have just, maybe I would have pressed slow-mo, okay, and just tried to suck the bone and the marrow out of the entire experience, because it's incredible.